I don't think Jesus needs me to get it all together and just accept that this is why or a reason. Instead, I can trust that he has a broken heart with me and that he thinks it was an evil event as well, and that the redemption that will come when I get to hold my son again is going to be how he'll heal me.
What's up, guys? My name is Josh, and I am the worship pastor here at New Hope, and I'm sitting with a good family friend of ours, Heidi. And Heidi, why don't you introduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about you and how long you've been at New Hope.
Yeah, so I'm Heidi. I attend New Hope with my husband Dustin and our 3 kiddos, and we've been, I would say it was the fall, September, October, that we started visiting New Hope, and just a really comfortable space for us. And so when Jeff was like, hey, we're doing a new members thing, and I think it was November, okay, like what? Well, what? Why not? You know, because yeah, we had been on a long journey of the church search, I guess I'll call it, after what we'll talk about, you know, after some really difficult stuff. And so we've been really grateful to be in a church that has felt like home, for lack of a better term, you know, just felt safe also.
Yeah. Well, we're super excited to have you as a part of our church. And so why don't we start off with you just telling us just a little bit about your upbringing in church and kind of like your background and, you know, just a little touch on that.
Yeah. So I'm a Colorado native. I was born and raised out toward Elizabeth, and if anybody knows where that's at. So kind of a rural growing up, my mom was a churchgoer, my dad was not. And so mom would take my brother and me 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday evening. And church was just an expectation. And I'm sure there were times as a kid it resonated with me and times it didn't. Probably more often than not, it felt like a chore. And yet, if there were friends, that was great. And so it was a pretty, I would say, legalistic denomination we were a part of. Great people, but not some of the theology I would ascribe to today. I was kind of going down a wrong track beginning of high school, getting into all the stuff that rural bored kids get into, and got in some big trouble. And it was this wake-up call. I mean, I was an honor student, really involved in things, and I just had this feeling of like, what am I doing? Like, which one am I going to choose? Am I going to be this good kid, or am I going to be that kid who goes nowhere? And that just really, I guess, convicted me. And I think now looking back, that was the Holy Spirit. So I decided to be baptized in our church and made kind of a 180. I started taking my faith very seriously for what faith was at that point, which was a lot of the specific doctrines of that church, and became really serious about it, which I think, though maybe the theology was off, it was a good thing for me in my heart. After high school, went to a college in that same denomination way out in Arkansas. And again, just experienced kind of the highs and lows that college-age kids go through, like, is this really my faith? Is this my parents' faith? And going through a lot of those deeper questions. Had a real transformative experience. I went on a missionary internship to Benin, West Africa, between my sophomore and junior years of college. Lived with these missionaries, and this was like at the height of what I would say my first spiritual crisis of faith, you know, that in a way, hopefully everybody has them at a certain point. You wrestle with God to come out on the other side realizing, whoa, it's actually more real than I thought. At the time, it feels like you might be losing your faith, but, and I didn't know that yet, that was new, but just saw things and experienced things that made me go, oh, this is all real, you know? So then you get excited and newly invigorated. That excitement helped me kind of have another little crisis of faith that turned into a good thing of going, oh, this denomination I was brought up in is not the only way. It's not, in that, at that time we were taught that our church was the only church going to heaven even. So it was that narrow.
What was the denomination?
The Church of Christ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So great, again, great people, just, and I'm not sure if all of those groups still hold kind of that strictly, but it was at the time for us. And to just like, again, looking back, sometimes it sounds so silly, like, well, yeah, of course other Christians are going to heaven. But at the time, that was revolutionary.
Yeah.
You know, wow. I felt like every time I struggled and wrestled and fought God, I would come out on the other side going, wow, God's actually better than I thought. You know, and that was a really, I think, important start in my early young adulthood for what was going to come later, to somehow have a foundation of like, whenever you think God is like the worst version of what you've been told, you're probably wrong. He's probably way better than that.
Right. So you were part of that church, you went out of the church, and then you met Dustin, right? And your husband, and was he a Christian?
Yeah, Dustin and I met after I did a year of mission work down in Juarez, Mexico. And that was, again, another transformative time after I had left the Church of Christ and was just open to any church, anywhere, you know, like we're all Christians. That was kind of that new freedom.
Yeah.
And so I was teaching here in Denver at a Christian school. Some collaborators set Dustin and I up. And Dustin had been a Christian, yes, he very similar, raised in a home where Dad did not go to church, did not lead the family spiritually, and Mom did all that.
Yeah.
So that was a common theme. But luckily, Dustin had some really great male mentors that helped him overcome a lot of the kind of negative aspects of his family life. The pastor of the church where he went was a great kind of fill-in, stand-in dad for him.
Right.
So he had a strong faith, and I was all on fire for my mission work in Juarez, and said, okay, if we're going to be serious, you got to be in on doing mission work in Juarez with me. And we went down, and just a lot of energy in our faith, a lot of just seeing God's hands in things.
Yeah. So you guys were together, strong in your Christian faith. So now let's roll into where things got rocky. And so you got married, and did you have kids before the incident happened? Okay.
Yes. So after married 2-3 years, we decided, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
We so thankfully wanted to have a baby and had a baby. You don't know how hard that can be before it's hard, right? For a lot of people. So our daughter Sylvia was born in 2012, and then surprise, she's only a year old and we're gonna have another baby. And here comes Valerie in 2014. And so we were I was involved in like one-on-one Bible studies, these intensive scripture memory things, just really writing a lot and being, I loved just the way of expressing my faith. We were there with these 2 babies, and then, okay, Valerie's a year and a half old. Oh, surprise! We had always had on our hearts adoption. That for my whole young adult life, I had been very passionate about someday adopting. And so it's just always this I don't know, we'll see how many children God gives us biologically, then maybe we'll adopt, or maybe somewhere in the middle. And so when we got pregnant the 3rd time, I thought, oh, okay, I guess it must not be time to adopt, we're pregnant again. You just don't think there's another alternative, but sadly there was for us. And we lost that sweet baby about 9 weeks into pregnancy. And it was, I've written a lot about it, I've blogged a lot about it, I'm working on self-publishing a book about all of this. And so I won't go into all the details, but those who've experienced it knows it's not like an invisible loss. It's the most shocking, painful thing. And yet it never in a sense dawned on me that it was okay to wrestle with God in this for some reason. At that first loss, it was just this, okay, for some reason this is God's plan and I just kind of have to go with it, and it's the worst, and I wanted that baby, and Dustin built a coffin for that baby. We buried her out at my parents' house. It was traumatic.
And that's the thing that I think gets overlooked a lot on how traumatic that is, because in our society, unless it comes out, some will say it's not even like something to fret about. But in your case, it is traumatic.
Absolutely.
And I've talked to you, and I can see how traumatic it was. So you lost the baby, and it was buried at your parents' house, and then there you and Dustin are, and now what?
Now we try to keep going and try to just keep moving forward with our faith, and then we get pregnant again and lose another baby. And this time it was earlier, no one really knew, and I just was so like this, almost this rumbling, like this doesn't feel right. This does not feel right to just go, well, okay, God, but I didn't know what else to do. And then you keep hoping there's coming like some miracle. So after we lost the second baby, I was in a rough place, and I had this dream. So I had this dream that I was in a hospital, and there was a baby in an incubator next to me, and I was scared in the dream that the baby was dead. And a nurse in the dream said, no, the baby's alive. And in the dream, I gave the baby the name Promise. And I woke up, and I thought, that was a mean dream, God. Like, my babies are buried and dead. And then later I thought, that was weird, the name Promise. Fast forward another month, we're pregnant again with our son Elliot. And that like dream, like, was that prophetic? Was that something from God? The cause of the 2 miscarriages had been something, it's a term not many people will know, called a subchorionic hematoma. It's like this overproduction of blood. And so maybe it was just those 2, right? Maybe that won't happen again. And 7 weeks into the pregnancy, it started happening again. But this time I didn't lose the baby. And every time I thought I was miscarrying again, I would go to the doctor, and they'd say, I don't know how, but your baby's still in there. Your baby's still alive. So that promise dream came to me. Yeah. Oh, maybe this is a promise from God. We kept moving forward, and always in this, like, is it today? Am I going to keep this baby or lose this baby? I kept trying to have faith that whatever was going to happen, God would take care of us. But this promise became very big in my head. And then other Christians started speaking into it. Oh, I just want you to know, like, God's promises don't come without a struggle, and oh, your body's not failing, He has a plan. We would continue to have these miraculous, what I do still think, very miraculous preservations of Elliot's life. Like, at one point, I was nearly in labor and went to the emergency room losing massive quantities of blood, and the doctor said, your baby's in there and still alive. Wow. Over and over, like every week. So even just the pregnancy itself was super traumatic. We get to where a lot of parents think you're kind of out of the danger zone and thinking, I can't believe we've made it to 20 weeks and we're getting there, only to find out at that ultrasound, something's wrong inside. Your water might be in danger of breaking very, very early. And that's exactly what happened. After that, to make a long story very short, my water did start breaking. It was like slow at first. And normally what they say is, if that happens, you're probably going into labor within 48 hours. So I remained pregnant with Elliot for 10 more weeks. And the miracle that was only confirmed in a lot of people speaking in, like, everything's going to be fine. I had a dream. Everybody else hears from God that it's all going to be okay. So I was hospitalized for 2 months. Again, very traumatic for my family. Dustin's taking care of the girls on his own. I'm laying in a hospital bed, being checked every day. Any minute, Elliot or I could die because this, like, once the water has broken, the danger of infection is like that. And so very, very scary, but I just kept thinking this is all like God's plan. And fast forward to Memorial Day, 6 years ago, and I went into labor, and Elliot's heart rate dropped very suddenly. I was rushed to an emergency C-section. Also, another trauma, very scary.
Yeah.
I went to sleep and didn't know what was happening. And when I woke up, there was Dustin. See, this is the part that makes me cry.
That's okay.
With a picture of Elliot. And when I saw this picture of him alive and holding his daddy's finger, I was like, I knew it. I just knew all these miracles and this promise. I knew God was going to save him. Like, Josh, there's really I feel like I never have the words to explain how sure I was that God had promised, that God had protected him, and that God's plan for him was life. And at first so the big danger for babies who don't have fluid, which he didn't for those last 10 weeks of the pregnancy, is that their lungs won't develop, because that's how babies' lungs develop in the womb, as they breathe the amniotic fluid. And they said when they don't know, they can't see inside how much he's getting, how much his lungs are developing, and they could tell when he was born his lungs were underdeveloped. But they stabilized him. Like, at first they're all like, we don't know, and then, oh, he's stable. Wow, he's really a fighter. You know, the doctors even started like with this like, I hope he's gonna be okay, to this, everything's looking good.
Yeah.
So just that, again, that vindication, I knew it. I knew God was gonna do this for us. I don't know why, because I have known people whose children have died, and I know that happens. So I didn't feel arrogant. I felt humbled, actually, you know?
Yeah.
But then, so I was still hospitalized. Elliot was in the NICU, and people came and visit. We were all just on this cloud of like, finally, oh, we're here. We're going to get through it. We'll be in the NICU. I get it for a long time, but he's alive. This is our child. We will do anything for him.
Right.
And then on day 5, he had a little problem with the chest tube they had in him, and they replaced it. Okay, it was kind of a scary up and down day. And in the afternoon, I was real tired, and the nurse was like, you look tired, you would take a nap, and Elliot will probably need a nap too. Okay.
Yeah.
I come back from the nap, and there's a team around him, and they said, we have to change his chest tube again. Okay, that's fine. You know, I'm sitting there praying, I'm texting, or I'm putting on Facebook, because all these people were praying for him, pray for Elliot. Then the doctor comes out and says, it's not working. Like, oh. And like, still, nothing in my head said he would die, because God had clearly promised all of the above.
Right.
I went in, I'll pray for him. I thought maybe this is it. Like, this is going to be some miracle that God wanted to show. I put my hands on him, and then they said, do you want to hold him? And I remember being confused, like, he's in an incubator, I shouldn't hold him. They just put him on me and took his tubes out and asked how fast Dustin could get there. And I just remember thinking, why? What? And that shock, the shock of a traumatic moment, like your body doesn't, your brain goes somewhere else because you can't comprehend.
Yeah.
And within about 10 minutes, he died in my arms. And all of that, kind of not just that experience, but everything that had built up in me through my whole life, to understand who God was, who I was, how God can speak, how I could hear him. I've used the analogy in my writing a lot. Like, if my faith were this beautiful, polished mirror at that moment, the moment Elliot died, it was like completely smashed to dust.
Wow. So we've hit this moment and of this hope and this hope and this hope and this journey that has built to this pinnacle, to just drop to a complete rock bottom, like you said, like complete dust.
Complete.
So now you're here, and this promise that you felt God was giving you is now no longer. So what do you do at this point?
Man. I mean, it's so debilitating, and I think this is why it's important to me to share. I work now for a foster care agency, and so I do a lot of reading about trauma and what it does to your brain, which I hadn't really thought about much before. And there's physiological damage when you go through a traumatic event or a series of events, to where your brain almost can't comprehend, can't function.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at first you're truly in denial. You hear the stages of grief too. Like, I remember waking up thinking, please please let me wake up and this is a bad dream. Please. I even slept with Elliot in my arms that night. Fell asleep and dreamed it was a bad dream. Woke up and saw him dead in my arms. Like, what does a mom do with that? What on earth? And driving away the next day, I will never forget. I remember feeling so angry that it was hot outside and sunny. What an inappropriate weather for such a dark day. And then having to be newly postpartum with a C-section scar and going that week to pick out my son's plot at a cemetery. Like, these were horrible, horrible things. And what I would like people to understand is, like, when that is connected to your image of God, there's no easy way to get through that. There's no churchy answer. There's no song. There's no Bible verse, because the trauma is interlaced with everything I thought I knew about God and me. So that was hard, because people would say the things they would have said, you know, earlier at a different kind of struggle in my life that would have actually been helpful. Was not helpful. So we just sleepwalked for a while. Because I had been separated from my daughters for 2 months, I really wanted to not let that be the only thing I was doing, but I had to be very careful. So we'd try and do something with them and then put them in their rooms for a nap, and I would cry and cry and cry and cry. You know, I tried to, it's been very traumatic for them as well. Because they were old enough to know what was happening, especially our older daughter. So the first year we went to trauma therapy, and that I think I'm very grateful. I look back and think that was kind of one of the first ways God met us where we were at. I didn't realize at the time that I wasn't just sad, I was traumatized, and that your brain really can't quite process anything well until you've worked through that trauma. And our therapist was incredible. I think one of the most incredible things she did was she always humanized Elliot. She always spoke about him as if like he was just another one of my children, because he was, you know, never minimized. But it was really lonely. It was really lonely to try to make sense of how to interact with others. I remember trying to go back to a Bible study I had been a part of, a weekday Bible study prior to that. And we had these workbooks. And so I mostly went because the girls had a little class. Okay, we'll just go for that. And I would try and do my workbook. And it was like, I have in one of my blog posts, it was like my Bible and my workbook were just these 2 stacks of paper just mocking me, just laughing at me, as if I could fill in blanks. Bible study. So I would show up with this blank workbook and just sit there, and I feel like all the ladies were just a little like, what do we do with Heidi? They didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. So I would sit there and then just go to my car and cry. Like, what? Looking back, I would tell somebody, don't go. Just put your kids in a preschool for a morning if you need a break. Like, but you keep trying to do the same things because you don't know what else to do. And just some of the things that came out in that, like, this kind of way that I've had to reframe how I view God in the last 6 years of, well, we don't know why that happened, but God has a reason, or we can't see his plan now, but we will. Like, those things are like daggers after you have gone through something so spiritually traumatic, and when all you want in the world is just your child back, and you can't. So I would say it was also a double addition going to the church we were at the time, even though they were wonderful people and they really tried to care for us well. They wrote us notes the day after he died. They brought us meals. You know, they did all the wonderful things. But they were kind of going a theological track that turned into more of a trigger. This very, for lack of a better term, maybe Calvinism or predestination. All of it is like God planned everything to happen this way. And so I was struggling with that a lot. I would sit there in a sermon and like, I remember one in particular where my friend who was preaching on prayer, and he was like, look at this hero in the Old Testament, and he prayed, and then God did what he asked, and when do we pray like this? And I had a flashback to me holding my son, desperately praying for him. And I stood up and I walked out. I was like, when do we pray like that?
Yeah.
I prayed like that.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't intended to be personally offensive.
Yeah.
But that was me needing to go, I'm not going to ascribe that evil that happened to our family to God.
Right.
Luckily, a friend gave me a book that really helped, and the book is God to Blame by Greg Boyd. I'd highly recommend it to anybody.
Okay.
It really made me rethink what maybe I had been told subtly and not so subtly about how God works. It's just one other way to look at it. But I think it has merit that, wait a minute, there's a lot of, God never said that, like, there's a wrestling with evil and darkness in this world, right? And just because something happens to any of us, even Jesus often would heal somebody, saying that he was overcoming the works of the devil. Not that, well, God just intends for people to suffer. That actually, I know God can use suffering for his good, for our good and for his glory. But often it is the evil one who brings about that pain and suffering.
Yeah. So with that, it brings just a raw, honest question that I've heard a lot, that people ask, like, I'll just ask it raw and just be as honest as you can. Why would you follow a God that allows that to happen? And there's no right answer. It's you went through that. Only you know what that was really like.
Yeah.
I can see, I'm sure everybody else can see, this was a deep pain to the core. So why follow a God that would allow this to happen?
Right. So I think a couple things. For a little while there, I wasn't sure I would. Why? Because again, if this was all, it felt like this horrible trick, Josh, to have been so sure to be. The scariest thing at that moment was like, I was absolutely sure I heard God. And this wasn't just I heard him wrong about what job to take. This was my child.
Yeah, far, far deeper than.
And if I can't hear him in that, how will I ever hear him again? And I'm still wrestling with that. I don't function the same way with that kind of topic. And I think the continued piece is saying that's okay. That's okay. What I found, again, through the year, my main grief and trauma tool was writing, and I've been a writer for a long time. So I turned this writing into screaming at God in my journals, and then I would kind of narrow it down to something, and I would put it on my blog, and a lot of people would respond and go, yes, I felt that way too. Thank you for writing that. But what I would find while I was writing was that, unfortunately, I felt like to fit into my church, to fit into a certain theology or a certain way that theology is presented in K-Love songs or in these Bible studies, like, that I had to just accept it just happened. It was just God's will, and oh well, you trust and you don't question, that kind of thing. And instead, I found a lot of friends in the Bible, like Jeremiah, Job, who are like, what are you doing? And why would you do this? And in that book, Is God to Blame? Greg Boyd kind of uses Job as an example of where God gets to the end. Job has not been he's been pretty unfiltered with God, accused God, screamed at God, and at the end, God doesn't explain a thing. He just says, have you noticed my creation? Almost this like, I know you don't understand, you can't understand. And that actually, when I let go of trying to understand why, I will never understand. And I've written, if God could come down himself and be like, this is why, I think I would be mad. There's nothing that I think would ever satisfy me.
Yeah.
But what I found instead is I can trust that he was with me, that he is with me. I have this place in my heart that's so broken, and I don't think Jesus needs me to get it all together and just accept that this is why or a reason. Instead, I can trust that he has a broken heart with me,
Mm-hmm.
and that he thinks it was an evil event as well, and that the redemption that will come when I get to hold my son again is going to be how he'll heal me. And in the meantime, I'm held by him. I think that's the only thing I can say, is that when I accepted that his love is more steadfast than my understanding, than any reasons, and that in brokenness, he's just as present, maybe more present,
Mm-hmm.
that is more comforting to me than any answer to why.
Yeah.
So I can follow him still because I truly believe now, and I didn't at the time, but I now truly believe that he was just as brokenhearted as I was in that moment.
Yeah. You know, typically I would say something like, and to wrap it up in the sense of like a Bible, something that pertains to the Bible. But I think the most important thing that we can do here is to just let all this sit, because I think in the church we miss the human aspect.
Mm-hmm.
We miss that there is deep, deep pain,
Right.
that nobody can really say the right thing or do the right thing, and I think that I'm just not going to say anything because I felt it during the conversation, but I still don't have any idea the depth of your particular thing, and I think that I'm gonna just let you. I mean, I think you just said the last word perfectly, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing this, and you know, hopefully this can reach somebody else who is at a place that you were, or at a place that you are now. So one thing I do want to ask is, if for the viewers, if this did touch, you have a blog, you said? Okay,
Yes.
What is your blog?
It is called rawandfiltered.com.
Okay, rawandfiltered.com, and there you write more about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you have a book that is in the works right now?
In the works, yes.
Okay.
It's not out yet.
Okay, I'm sure you'll post that on your blog when it is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Heidi. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. And yeah, I mean, it was fantastic to go down that road with you. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.